You're listening to Insight on Capital Public Radio. I'm Rick Kushman. Valentine's Day is all about the glossy romance of love, not to mention flowers and candy and cards and probably an expensive meal. But love is, of course, a little more complicated than that. And it can be good for us. Sarah Strand is a psychology professor at Sacramento State and a primatologist at the California National Primate Research Center at UC Davis, and she knows all the phases of love and what it can do to us, which kind of sounds like a country song, doesn't it? She's here this morning to help us get a little more understanding of love, which, face it, we all can use. Dr. Strand, welcome to Insight.
Thank you for having me.
So, there's some great stuff here. And frankly, I was taking deep notes when I was reading sort of some of the background on this. There's three kinds of love, right? Lust, romance, and attachment, as you say. And
Correct.
They all have different physical reactions. Could you talk just a little bit about that? And then we'll go into each one.
Sure. So the basic types of love that you just described there are more about how the brain processes the kinds of love feelings that we have. So what we're talking about are certain brain areas that produce very specific neurochemicals, and they're going to be separate but also interactive. So we've got the lust component, we've got the romantic attraction component, and then we've got the romantic attachment component. And they're all very different in terms of what their functions are and the brain activity that characterize each of them.
So each has a benefit, and I think I've seen that the attachment phase has the most benefit. But let's start with lust because that's where it starts.
Sure.
Are there benefits to the lust phase? I mean, besides the obvious?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the benefits are basically going to come from having sex, right? And so there are blood pressure goes down in reaction to a stressful event. If you've been having intercourse, there's some evidence that suggests that that prostate cancer goes down based on the number of times a man ejaculates during the course of the month. There are sleep benefits. I mean, you always hear that thing, why do men always fall asleep shortly after having sex? Well, that's because prolactin is increasing, and that's at its peak during the REM phase of sleep.
So we're not just heathens.
No,
okay.
no, it's very biological.
Yeah, all right, good to know. All right. And then comes the romantic part, which is a lot long. Obviously, that is sort of the. Well, let me actually ask it this way.
Sure.
So each phase sort of has its separate duration, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it like that, but I think it's very individually variable. I mean, really what the components are separated by are their functions, right? And so the lust phase of love, the primary function is just to make us feel attracted to anyone that's remotely appropriate, right? And then the romantic attraction phase is more designed to focus our attraction to somebody who is reasonably appropriate for us in terms of raising offspring. I mean, if you're really going to get biological about it. But then the romantic attachment phase comes in when you've found that right person, you've had your offspring, and you need to raise them to a certain point. And so there are certain, reactions in the brain and drives and motivations that will encourage those kinds of, phases to progress from one part to another.
So anthropologically, I guess would be a way to describe it. We weren't really designed to stay together for more than the time it takes to raise a kid.
That's the $64,000 question, and I'm not sure research has been conducted enough to answer that question.
All right. Well, let's go back to some of your other research because I find this kind of really interesting too. Yeah. So you're a primatologist as well. You study monkey love.
Not particularly, but yes, sure.
How do you let me go to the how first. How do you study this? I mean, do you use like functional MRI? Do you look at what parts of the brain light up? Do you measure chemicals?
Exactly. So the research that has advanced the field the most has been conducted with those functional magnetic resonance imaging studies. And, you can have a person, a lot of these studies, you have a person look at a picture of their beloved, and then you have a person look at a picture of someone who's familiar but completely neutral, that they don't have those romantic feelings for. And when they're in the fMRI machine, you can actually see the parts of their brain regions, the parts of their brain that are being activated based on the flow of blood to that area. So you can really pinpoint the difference between what parts of your brain are activating when you're looking at your beloved and when you're looking at someone neutral.
And so if you're looking at your beloved and good things aren't happening, your beloved is not should not be a party to this research result, right?
They do screen subjects based on their degree of passionate love. Okay. So you do have to have a certain level.
I'm just saying.
Yes, that would be bad.
And so then how much in studying monkeys and lower primates or other primates, some would argue that they're better relationships than we are. How much applies to humans?
So the talk that I gave on Tuesday addressed that specifically in the attachment phase. And there's been a lot of evidence suggesting that if you have a solid, stable attachment figure, then you are buffered from the stressful events of life. And so that can be very directly measured in non-human primate societies. If you take an individual that has formed a very stable attachment, doesn't necessarily have to be with mom, it could be with a buddy, and you have that animal undergo some kind of stressful event, maybe it's a separation stress, maybe it's unstable social groups or something like that, their levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, rise significantly less than somebody who doesn't have a stable attachment. And so you can see how that might translate to humans as well.
So, okay, I'm going to remind my wife that I am useful. I'm talking with Dr. Sarah Strand, a psychologist and primatologist, about how love affects us physically. Let's go to phase 2, which is the romantic part before we go more to the
That's the more fun part.
Okay, so what is happening during that?
Yeah, so romantic attraction is more characterized by brain activity related to like drive-motivated rewards. And so if you think about it, when you're falling in love for the first time, you're obsessively thinking about that person. It's very hard to think about anything else. You have this heightened energy and this like sort of need, this sort of drive to be in close proximity to that person.
Right.
And the kinds of brain activities that's going on during that time and the kind of neurochemicals that are being released are very similar to the activity that results when we express other kinds of drive motivated behavior. So, the drive to eat, the drive to drink, the drive to, survive. And, mating is another one of our drives.
So when you're doing research on that, do you like show somebody a picture of their beloved and then show them a hamburger and see that the same things?
You have to have a little bit better control than that, because we have, food versus human reward. But it's essentially as I described.
I'm just saying I kind of love hamburgers, too.
Yeah, no, so maybe there'd be no difference for you, yes. Yeah, but it's exactly the same. You show in terms of the research that I'm familiar with, it's exactly the same, where you show a picture of the beloved, you show the picture of somebody neutral, and then you can really get an idea of the brain activity that's going on. And it's quite remarkable.
Well, and I'm looking through your notes of your speech that you were talking about, you were saying that among the things that happens with that sort of romantic love is that it gets to a point where we no longer feel the obsession.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, this isn't a great example in terms of love, but it's kind of like drugs of abuse, right? If you are...
That's another country song, by the way, but love is a drug of abuse.
That's true. You need to continually increase your dose of a particular drug in order to get the same effect, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're thinking about an addiction to a particular person, say, there's only so much that you can increase, your proximity to that person. And so after a period of time, those, you essentially adapt to that person. But that isn't a bad thing. That means you're moving into the romantic attachment phase, which also has a lot of benefits associated with it as well.
And so that's then a different physiology. Mm-hmm. And what happens to the attachment? You were talking a little bit about that already, but in the attachment phase, what's the chemical reaction that's different?
So the brain areas that are activated during attachment are more characterized by areas that are rich in oxytocin and vasopressin receptors. And those are really the hormones that are associated with maintaining and creating social bonds. And so you've got a feeling of calm, a sense of peace, a very, like, people who are romantically attached feel, have reduced stress reactions when they're together. They start to experience separation anxiety if they've been apart for a long time. We're not talking 2 hours, we're talking like maybe 2 months or something like that. So
2 hours would be unhealthy?
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's probably the first phase, right? The romantic crazy phase?
Yeah, but one thing that I didn't say about the romantic attraction phase that's really fascinating is that there's evidence suggesting that nerve growth factor is elevated only in people who are in that middle phase, that romantic attraction phase.
What do you mean by nerve growth?
Nerve growth factor is, it's involved in many different things, but one of them is neuron survival and growth. And so, it's very difficult to assess neurogenesis in humans, but this might suggest that we're developing new neuronal connections when we're exposed to this brand new person who we're addicted to.
So love makes you smarter?
Yeah, well, yes, let's just say that. It's Valentine's Day, let's go with it.
Yes, let's go with that. I agree. Wow, that's sort of interesting.
It is.
So then moving into the attachment phase, and that's, I mean, with humans, we want that to be permanent. Is that something that the chemicals can continue to be produced?
Well, when you start getting into, human long-term attachment, there are all sorts of variables that are, associated with how long that bond is going to be able to be maintained. I mean, there is no, I think the secret, and never having been married, I think, one of the things about relationships that stay together for 50 years is that they continually change with each other. And so one of the things that this research suggests is not that the different phases are completely independent. They're bidirectional. You can go back and forth. One of the things that the research suggests is that if you are in a long-term stable relationship and you continue to do new things together, then you can actually sort of increase activity in those areas associated with, reward and drive, and kind of renew your relationship again.
So you take up skydiving.
Basically continue to reinvest in your love.
Well, that's interesting. And does that go back sort of to phase 2, where then as you do new things, maybe new reactions emerge, new neural pathways?
Yeah. So you just kind of figure out new things to do together and create those, new experiences, and you can kind of relive that romantic attraction all over again.
Yeah. I know you've said that the jackpot, of course, is hitting all 3.
Yes.
And is that, can you have all 3 reactions going at the same time and the chemicals from all 3 coming out?
I don't think it's all simultaneous. I think that, over the course of, the time, let's say a given week or a given day, each of these things might be a little bit stronger. But I think the idea is that, on average, you tend to have an equal representation of all 3 of these, main components. And that's going to be, passion and intimacy as well as commitment. So if you have a good mix of all 3 of those, not necessarily happening simultaneously, then that means you've got, your jackpot relationship.
So, and an argument for Valentine's Day, I suppose, is that it does new things, right?
Yes.
It's creating all these new things.
Exactly.
Well, there we go. We are learning something. We'll have more information on our website, which is capradio.org/insight. Dr. Strand, thanks for the lessons. I'm going to go do something new for my wife.
Thank you.
Have a great Valentine's Day.
You too.
You're listening to Insight from Capital Public Radio. Coming up, Chef Patrick Mulvaney takes his cooking to some culinary hallowed ground. We'll be right back.